Hey, I'm Stephanie, and it's time for some makeup comparisons. Today is all about the lips and the cheeks, and it's all within the context of my Panning for Gold project, in which I pluck cosmetics from my collection that have similar claims, and I pit them against each other in head-to-head comparisons for a period of time so that I can figure out which ones are the true gold nuggets of my collection. And I report back anytime I strike gold, or strike out as the case may be. But this quest for nuggets is high stakes because I intend to declutter anything that isn't a gold nugget. And the whole reason behind that is because I feel like just because something doesn't work perfectly for me doesn't mean that it might not work perfectly for someone else. And I would much rather have those things get use instead of just sitting in my drawer and expiring. So I look at this project as a way to curate my collection, and it's a sort of putter declutter. We've got a lot to talk about today, so as always, I will leave timestamps so you can hop, skip, and jump to whatever's most interesting for you. And now we're just going to jump right in. Let's start with the lippies. I have been trying to use aversion therapy to get over my fear of pink lipstick, and I think it's working because I feel a little bit less clownish now since I have been wearing these. I decided to pit my Lancome L'Absolu Rouge Lipstick in Rose Nude against this Too Faced lipstick in the shade Spice Spice Baby. I'm not going to go too much into detail about the formulas of these because I do believe that this one has been discontinued, but I feel like both of these feel nourishing, but only this one actually is. This Lancome L'Absolu Rouge lipstick initially feels very nourishing on the lips, but I do feel like this formula kind of dries out my lip skin over time. But I'm not sure if that's just me because I might be having a reaction to one of the ingredients in the product. So if you have ever used one of the L'Absolu Rouge lipsticks from Lancome, maybe you could let me know in the comments. What has your experience been with this? Do you find this to be a nourishing formula? Do you feel that it dries your lips out over time? It's just something I'd be curious to know if it's something that's just individual to me. But that kind of dry feeling only happens when I use this lipstick repeatedly back to back. So it's not like that alone would disqualify it from the running. However, I do feel like this formula in general is just more nourishing for real. Like I never feel like my lips get dried out with this one at all. But the real difference I find when it comes to these lipsticks is the color. Both of them are very similar shades of pink, but makeup is about nuance. And I find that the pink in here is slightly more saturated and it's not quite as earthy as this pink. And I feel like this one is more adjacent to the natural colors found in my cheeks when I flush. And it's closer to, I don't know, the kind of tones or the warmth of my lip skin or something. I don't know. I feel like this truly is a pink that's easy for me to wear because it doesn't make my lips look harsh. This one, for some reason, I feel like it makes my lips look super defined, which is really strange because it's not the formula that's doing that. It's the color. But I don't like that. It's not that I want a blurred lip line, but I think that in general, softer things suit my face. And because this one is softer, this one is the winner. So out of the two of them, Spice Spice Baby is the winner. Now I realize that those two pink lipsticks weren't particularly dramatic, but they felt dramatic to me as someone who always gravitates towards nudes. But I felt like that subtle pop of color did give me some courage. And so I thought I would roll in something more dramatic this time around, namely these two. The colors looks really intense and a little bit scary to me, but these are both balms, and so that means that the pigmentation isn't particularly strong. This is the YSL Volupte Tint and Balm in the shade 8, and this is a lip stain from Jane Iredale, and it says lip stain, but I've always worn it as a lip balm, so we'll see. Maybe I've been wearing it wrong, but I'll see which of these that I like better. The next category we're going to talk about today is setting powders. This is a category that used to just completely bore me because as someone with dry skin, I used to think, oh my gosh, why would you ever put powder on your face? It would just suck the life out of it. But ever since my skin has gotten oily and now that it's so hot out, I feel like setting powders have become my best friend and I'm very intrigued by them. So I put in 2 pressed powders and 2 loose powders into this today. So let's start off with the pressed powders. I had this little bitty sample of this Makeup Forever Ultra HD setting powder, and I thought I would pit it against this IT Cosmetics Bye Bye Pores pressed powder. And I was actually able to make a decision quite quickly about these. This powder doesn't really tamp down my shine as much as I need it to. I feel like my skin looks very nice when I wear it, but it's still a little bit too glowy, and then the oils start to kind of seep through almost immediately. So this one isn't for me, and I knew that pretty much right away. The IT Cosmetics Bye Bye Pores powder, on the other hand, did mattify and blur a little bit more right from the get-go, and it did keep me from getting oily for longer than the Makeup Forever powder. So this is the clear winner. As for whether it's a gold nugget or not, I'm still trying to figure that out. I think maybe I would need to pit it against the winner from last video, which was the Charlotte Tilbury Airbrush powder. I'll have to see which one works better, which one keeps me mattified for longer and blurred better. So that's what I'm gonna do. I realize it's not a direct comparison because this powder does add coverage and this powder doesn't, but it will be interesting to see how they work side by side and to see which one mattifies for longer, which one gives me a better finish on my face, and that maybe that will help me come to more of a conclusion about powders in general. Next up are loose setting powders, and I decided I would put this Dermablend Professional Setting Powder against another IT Cosmetics powder, the Bye Bye Pores Loose version. And full disclosure, this one was sent to me by IT Cosmetics. The other one I purchased myself, but this one is from the company. Sent free of charge, but with no obligation to review or anything. When I wore these two powders in direct comparison, one on one side of my face, one on the other, at the same time, I noticed some pretty important differences. Number one, the Dermablend powder is not meant for my under eyes. It made them look dry, heavy, cakey, unattractive. So as an under eye powder, this just isn't for me. On the rest of the face, it did a very good job mattifying and it didn't make my skin look heavy, but it also didn't make my skin look any prettier either. The mattifying effect that I got with this was about 4 hours before I needed to touch up, which I thought was pretty good. So, you know, definitely not a bad powder, but not a beautifying powder either. The IT Cosmetics Bye Bye Pores powder, on the other hand, has a blurring effect, which I really enjoyed on the larger pores in my T-zone, but also on my under eye. So this powder is more flexible because it looks good under my eye, and it also looks good over my whole face. The only problem with this one is that it didn't hold me matte for quite as long. I got about 3 hours of wear with this one before I had to touch up. So the question is, what to do? I think this one is a gold nugget because it made my skin look so blurred, but this one kept me matte for longer. And so I think what I'm going to do is put this one in my stage bag, because when I'm on stage, I'm far enough away from people that they can't see my pores, so it doesn't matter if they're blurred. And this did keep me matte for longer, which is another thing that's very important on stage. So this one I think will live in my stage bag, whereas this one will live on my vanity, and I can also pop it into my stage bag if I feel the need, because this one is my personal preference to use on the daily. So I think that's a good solution. I don't know, what would you do? When it comes to what I'll be rolling in next, if you saw my relatively recent haul video, you'll know that a friend of mine sent me a box. And in that box, she had some products that she wanted me to try and review on my channel. And she sent me 2 loose powders. And she was extremely thoughtful because she knows that I deal with dark under eye circles, and both of these are kind of pink powders that are supposed to help correct dark under eye circles. So she sent me the Givenchy Prisme Libre powder in the shade 3, and then the Huda Beauty Easy Bake powder in the shade Cherry Blossom Cake. So I will be comparing these two both under my eyes, but also all over the face to collect my thoughts. So if you'd like to hear about the results of these, make sure you like and subscribe so you don't miss the update. Now we get to the juicy part, the blushes. And the first 2 products are actually not blushes at all. They're lipsticks that I use as a blush. This is actually Charlotte Tilbury's Pillow Talk lipstick, and I had used up the lipstick until there was just a nubbin left and I couldn't even get any more out of the bullet onto my lips. So I just kind of dug the rest of it out. I depotted it and put it in here, and this is what I have been using as a cream blush. And I am comparing it to this Kylie Jenner Velvet Liquid Lipstick in the shade Bear. And I know that they look very different next to each other, but they actually look very similar on the skin. So what did I think of these? They were very similar in a whole lot of ways, but ultimately I feel like there was a subtle difference in that this one could look a little bit patchy and fade a little bit faster than this, which seems kind of logical to me because this is a normal bullet lipstick formula, which doesn't necessarily have the long wearing qualities of a liquid lipstick. Whereas this liquid lipstick, once it was blended out and set down, it pretty much stayed put. And I found that it was very easy to blend, and I liked the fact that it stayed put for longer. So I don't need both of these in my collection. So I think I'm going to keep using this one as a cream blush, and I am going to see if anybody wants the rest of my Charlotte Tilbury Pillow Talk lipstick, because it is a very nice blush. It's just that, you know, I have something that does the same thing and I don't need two of them. When it comes to rolling in more cream blushes, I don't think I have to, because I've now gone through all of my cream blushes and I feel like every single one of them has a place and a purpose in my kit. And so I don't feel the need to test anymore. So we're just going to move straight on to powder blushes. I thought I would compare this Color Effects blush duo in the shade Pink Dahlia to two separate powder blushes. And so let's start with the matte shades. I compared the matte in this palette to this matte shade in the Physicians Formula Butter Blush formula. It's the color Vintage Rouge. Now, I have often used both of these separately and lerved them whenever I use them. They're both gorgeous shades. They both look beautiful no matter what. They're both good blushes, but having them on my face at the same time, one on one cheek, one on the other, taught me that they are not the same. One of these is, I think, objectively better. So why don't you guess which one in the comments? Having these both on my face at the same time taught me that the color is almost identical, and both blushes look absolutely gorgeous, but this one is so much easier to apply. The blendability is just there immediately. I felt like this blush went wherever I wanted it to go without me even really having to think or blend much with my brush. Whereas this one took a good deal of work. The end effect looked gorgeous and actually pretty identical. I don't know that I would have been able to tell which was which just by looking at the end result, but it was the process and getting to the end result that made a difference. And so for me, the matte shade in here is definitely the clear winner of these two. So this one, not a nugget. When it comes to the shimmer shade in the Pink Dahlia palette, I decided I would compare it with this Becca blush in the shade Camellia. And because this Becca blush has been discontinued, I'm not going to go too much into the formula, but I'm going to talk a little bit about my thought process, because I think that's actually the more interesting part here. Both formulas I feel like performed comparably. The finish was pretty much identical. The real difference is in the color. And when I look in the viewfinder, I think you can also pretty clearly see that. They're both pink, but the Pink Dahlia is a little bit warmer of a pink, and it's not quite as saturated, whereas the Camellia shade is more saturated and slightly cooler toned. And I felt like ultimately the same thing that happened with the lipsticks happened with the blushes. I felt like this shade, the more saturated one, gave my face a more angular look almost. It almost looked severe on me. I mean, not really. We're talking subtleties here. This still looked really pretty. But when I was comparing them directly, I always thought that my face looked just a little bit softer with this. And I just feel like that's more fitting for my overall look. So there was another clear winner. And luckily, it was two shades within the same palette, so I don't have to worry about depotting anything. So this Color Effects duo, definitely a gold nugget, or a bar of soap, either way. And this Becca Camellia blush is gorgeous, so I am definitely going to rehome it. When it comes to the roll-ins for the powder blushes, I thought I would compare these two. This is another Becca blush. It's in the shade Flower Child, and I'll be comparing it to the classic Milani Luminoso. They are amazingly similar in the pan, and so I am really excited to see which one of these wins. And I'd also be curious to know, do you have a prediction of which one might win this battle? Thanks for hanging out with me today. If you enjoyed this video, I hope you'll give it a thumbs up, comment, subscribe, all that jazz. But even if you don't, I hope you have a wonderful week, and that we can all remember that even stumbling can be a form of moving forward. So let's stumble in style.